Greetings, YouTube. One of the things I've been using for decades now is that if somebody wants to turn into a creature or turn someone else into a creature, like a polymorph spell, you have to have experience about the peak creature. If you're a druid and you want to turn into a specific animal, you have to have some knowledge of that animal. And one of the ways they can do that is that there's a commune spell where they can like sit in an area and they just kind of zone themselves into the region they're in, and that would give them a feel for stuff. Um, but it's not going to probably get you it's happenstance. Depending on what you get in that scan is going to be what you have access to. Um, More likely route, however, is to have a medicine bag of some variety that lets you keep bits of those animals, teeth, claws, scales. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to have. You don't have to kill them. You could have acquired these things from other sources. Um, the animal itself could still be alive, but of course you could also just consume some of the animal, and that would also now burn that DNA option into you. Now you know how to become that animal because you have absolutely consumed that animal. It's part of you now. And the same would work for monsters. That again, if you're going to be going after, you know, fully sapient monsters or creatures, or even other, you know, civilized folks, you probably aren't going to want to eat their flesh. But again, you could get other parts of their body, again, bones and teeth and things like that, which would be acceptable to have it as a material component or have it consumed as well. There's no reason you couldn't find a bone from a deceased corpse that you had nothing to do with, dry it, grind it, put it into into some wine and drink it down, and now you've got that into your system. Now, I've always kind of done that. It means that people don't have a instantaneous, I can go well, instantaneous access to all the cool things as soon as they get access to the spells or the abilities cases, wild shape. And it's a role playing thing. You have to go and hunt things down. Sometimes you spend money and someone else hunts them down for you, and you just buy the components. Unless of course they're lying to you, and you find out when you take a drink, you don't turn into the thing you wanted to turn into, and then there's a bit of a discussion with the dude that sold you the part. Um, but I realized that there are spells that their options are more limited. Specifically, summons nature's ally and summon monster. So if you cast either of those spells, you have a limited repertoire of what you get. You can cast a spell and bingo, you have a selection, and that's the only selection you can get for that level of the spell. I realize that you could always also get more members of a lower level spell by casting the higher slot. Yeah, I get that. But the point is that at that spell slot, that's your options. And because it's your options, I don't impose the whole you have to know the thing because the spell is doing that for you. The spell is saying, here's your options. You get 5. Pick one. Okay, so it's not up to you. It's the spells filtering the whole process. The spell is doing the work. So if you summon a creature, I'm going to assume that the bits of the creature will disappear at the end of its existence, whether because it dies or the spell runs out. Gone. But can you use that time period? Can you summon a monster, not have it attack anything, and then study it, commune with it on some level? Maybe use a different kind of spell that's like a scanning spell that would let you imprint that monster in your repertoire, in your head, part of you now. So you could then turn someone else into that monster or turn yourself into that monster, and how polymorph works. Would that be viable? Would getting the intel from a summoned creature be a viable, acceptable method of getting to know something? It is still not going to give you access to everything because those spells, Summon Nature Ally and Summon Monster, don't access every creature in the world. There's a set number. Intriguingly, it makes me wonder, how did they arrive at that? Who set up those filters? Who set up those lists? Because somebody had to. In world, someone did that. So why did they do that? And are there variations of summon monster spells that have a different selection? I think that's an interesting idea, that you could go out there and hunt down different versions of the same spell to get a different access to different creatures. I think that's a viable role-playing motivation right there. But I think it would be acceptable. You cast the thing, it shows up, you cast the second spell, and bingo. Or maybe you have to use a skill of some variety. Maybe that's not a skill. You have to do is you study it, and since you're investigating the creature, and then you have an understanding of it, and then you can use that information at a later date. I also like the idea of allowing summoned creatures, either version of the druidic or the arcane, um, to be allowed to work as laborers as opposed to just combat. I think you should be able to say, okay, I want this thing to stay here as non-combat. And if you do that, it stays for a longer time period than its combat. For example, if you summon a bear and you want the bear to stay around, instead of saying staying X number of rounds, it stays X number of hours. And then you have a bear. What you want to use for the bear, I'm not quite sure. Maybe you want to cuddle with the bear, who knows? But you've got now access to a bear. Now, if you tell the bear to attack, it will once, and then it's gone. And if something attacks it, it will defend itself, and then the clock goes from hours back to rounds. So there probably may only be a few rounds of combat, then the bear is going to disappear. And I think that is flexible, and it's not going to break the bank, but it still gives you access to some abilities that the party may not be able to access themselves from within the group. There are creatures out there that can do things that a lot of people can't. So you'd be able to get access to one of these creatures to do some things for you other than combat. Now, I realize that this is probably going to be potentially abused, but lots of things can be potentially abused. It would take some work to figure it out. And there's also always the possibility that there's someone in charge. Now, you don't usually get the actual creature. You kind of get an avatar of the creature. All right. Though I did have back in second edition where the entire party found themselves teleported to another plane of existence because an alien wizard cast a summon monster spell, and what he chose was an adventuring party. And so they got cast there, and they had a fight on behalf of him, and when the fight was over, they disappeared. And they returned back to home. That was kind of fun. But somebody out there or something is creating those avatars. What if there's somebody in charge of all of them? And maybe they will take umbrage if you try to abuse what they see as their charges, as their children. They're okay to lend them out. They're okay to let you use them. But if you use them in a way that they consider to be insulting or, just uncalled for, maybe they show up and you don't want to meet them. Or they don't give you what you want next time you cast that spell to show you, somebody's watching you. You're under observation. You're on thin ice. Watch your step. I think that idea has some legs. I haven't fleshed that out. Just kind of, again, I'm kind of riffing off the top of my head here. But I like the idea of summoning creatures and then using either a skill or a spell to get the information from that you need, so you then can use that information at a later date as a polymorph or a wild shape. I think that's kind of cool. And again, the whole role-playing thing is you still have to acquire those spells. Obviously, druids have an easier time acquiring those spells than do arcane casters. But it's another way of people trading spells. They're trading you. I'll let you copy this spell out of my spell book if you let me copy that spell out of your spell book. Swapping things. And copying a spell doesn't hurt the spell hurt the spell in a spell book. So I think that's kind of a thing that's always been around. Mages have been doing that for ages. I get it, mages. I'll see myself out. But I like that idea, and I'd like to see if you folks like that idea. So again, this is just kind of some stuff I'm riffing off the top of my head, ideas I'm playing with, ways I keep myself from being bored at work and falling into a morass of depression because of the world in the way it currently is. So let's talk about summoning creatures and the intel we can garner from them.